if you saw that video in the vestibule, those of you who are on, Slow Money is about 11 years old now. Over $80 million has gone to over 800 small food enterprises and small farms in dozens of communities. Almost all of that was in low interest loans, but there was no one way to do it. We didn't tell everybody this is how you do slow money. But lately, I and a little troop of us have focused on one thing, which is creating community groups that make 0% loans by majority vote of local community members. There are 5 groups, 4 in Colorado, 1 in Virginia, others in formation, including in Jerusalem and probably in China, Yantai, China. And we hope a bunch of other places. And that's the goal of Beetcoin, is to get a flow of online capital going to provide seed capital for new groups and help grow the existing groups in addition to the local capital. And when the Beetcoin money goes through to the local groups, it stays local. In other words, all the actual funding and all the circulation of capital goes to these local groups that make 0% loans. So it's a whole new way of funding small organic farms and local food systems. Don't get bogged down in the details on that. You can go to the website. Please go to the website, beetcoin.org, look at it. It'll answer most of your questions. No donation to Beetcoin is too small. It's very important to say that, because we're trying to generate a large number of small donations and engage tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. It's an ambitious thing. We think it's needed. We think it will do a lot of good. And some of you have already chipped in, so thank you for that. Beetcoin dialogues are twice a month. I'm not going to say anything more about that because I want to introduce Narendra. So thank you all for coming. It is my sincere and great pleasure to introduce Narendra Varma, who, if you read the invite, which you probably did, if you're on, let's see, we're up to, we got 70 folks on now, so that's great. Narendra, after a career in tech, has become a farmer, not just any farmer. He has a very ambitious, beautiful business plan that includes a co-op and a farm store and a farm that's permacultural. I'll let him tell that whole story. So we're very lucky to have him. And for those of you who, well, both of you were on last week, 2 weeks ago, or you weren't, we had a really beautiful presentation by Zoe Bradbury, who also happens to be in Oregon. That was a coincidence. These are going to be from all over the country and possibly international over time. But our first 2 just happened to be from Oregon, first 2 Beetcoin dialogues. And Zoe is grossing about $300,000 a year on 6 acres of row crops, 2 of which are fallow in a given year. So just think about that, and a few acres of orchard. It's a beautiful farm. Narendra is kind of the next step up, I guess you'd say, a rung or 2 up from a business standpoint, you know, around $1 million in a larger farm and whatnot. So that's my setup. Thank you all so much for coming. Look forward to the conversation after. And Narendra, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Woody. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that. I'm going to share my screen right here, and then we'll get started. Sorry, just adjusting so I can see everything. Okay, so as Woody said, my name is Narendra Varma. I'm the founder and executive director of Our Table Cooperative, which is located about 15 miles south of Portland. Thank you for having me here today. I'll start with just a little bit of sort of a background about myself. Why is this thing not? Oh, there we go. And you know, personal kind of story. As Woody mentioned, I was in the tech sector in the beginning, in the 90s, sort of the go-go 90s. And as a result of that, just by kind of being in the right place at the right time, I kind of reaped a pretty nice financial windfall, not because I was clever, but just literally was in the right place at the right time. And that allowed me the sort of the luxury of time to kind of look, to quit the tech sector and kind of explore other things. My wife and I really were living in Seattle at the time, and we were super interested in both food and community. Initially with food, it was just, I really like to eat. You know, I grew up in a very foodie kind of household. We had young kids. We were like a lot of young parents, you know, kind of thinking a lot about what we were putting in their bodies. And the kind of the what I call the holy nexus of food and community, this kind of universal desire for people to come together around food and break bread together. So that really was kind of the impetus behind a lot of this. Now, at the same time, we were kind of looking at things like climate change and all these other problems that were occurring. And it kind of kept coming back to food for me as a place where a lot of these issues that our society is facing, some of them existential, kept coming back to food system as a place where you could kind of at least look at these things and examine them. And I'm kind of a systems nerd, so that worked really well for me. I was at the time doing a lot of our own personal shopping at the local farmers markets, and we were going to farmers markets 3, maybe sometimes even 4 times a week because we had time. Over time made friends with the folks over there, etc., and realized that even the people who were super successful, so the ones who were there year in and year out, as in they hadn't failed yet, maybe they'd even been around for multiple decades. Once I got to know them a little bit better and asked them some more pointed questions, I was a little surprised and really quite shocked to learn that most of them were on sort of maybe 1 or 2 bad seasons away from bankruptcy. And it just seemed like it was, like as successful as they were, it seemed like a really shitty way to run a food system, on the backs of people's passion and suffering at some level. So that really kind of blew my mind a little bit. And around the same time, Woody's book came out, the first Slow Money book, and I got super interested in that. I mean, I'd been kind of play acting at sort of being an investor. I didn't quite know what that meant other than outside of the Wall Street context. And when I read the Slow Money book and met Woody, that totally changed what I was doing personally as an investor. Started to kind of do what a lot of people do, find the sort of the local food producer or farmer or market or whatever it is, and help and support and things like that. And then I realized that I really needed to kind of get my hands more in the soil. I really like being hands-on. So my wife and I decided to kind of move to Portland and start doing something. And the something that we weren't really quite sure what it was. So we put together a team of people and started asking questions. We talked to a lot. We spent about a year, just learning and listening and talking to folks. Meanwhile, I was kind of taking some permaculture design classes and very interested in this, in the permaculture design ethics, the third ethic of which being, sharing the surplus. So it's kind of asking this question of what is each of our surpluses that we could maybe share with the broader community to kind of build that better world. And we sort of decided to kind of go all in and devote all of our time, money, and energy and love really to doing something here in Oregon on a farm. So we ended up on this farm, which I'll show you in a little bit. In 2011 is when we purchased the property. And very quickly, we ran into all sorts of problems. And the problems were really more around this idea of kind of commons management, because at the time we were trying to be a farm incubator. So the problems we ran into were around commons management kind of things. And just when we spoke to other incubators, they were like, oh yes, we run into these kinds of things as well. And we kind of asked ourselves the question, like, what is it, that we really want to keep? Do we want a model of land management and farming that's kind of looking that 7 generations forward kind of thing? Or are we really excited about this individual entrepreneurship mythology that's certainly in the Western United States seems very tied up with this cowboy mythology? And we decided that the cowboy mythology was kind of fake because people are not solo, nobody does anything alone. And that we really were more interested in this other thing. So we kind of asked ourselves the question that what are the economic and cultural models that would be need to be created to really support this vision that we had for a resilient and interdependent food culture. And we decided to really just kind of start fresh and imagine a vertically integrated community scale food system. Okay, so we said, we want to create a model community food system that's owned by the community. We have no clue what that is. Some of the elements that started to come up very quickly was that, we obviously needed to grow stuff. We were on a farm. We needed to aggregate things from other farmers because we couldn't grow everything ourselves. There was always value-added processing that was necessary, the retail components, the distribution. So all of these pieces needed to kind of come together. And we decided to create a single vertically integrated cooperative, a multi-stakeholder cooperative that was owned by the community. So 2013 is when we started the co-op. It's based on the 60-acre farm that's about 15 miles south of downtown Portland. Oregon has excellent land use planning. So as a result, even though we're on this very rural property, you can kind of see at the back of the photo over there, that there's some houses and things like that. There are 35,000 households within a 5-mile radius of us. So even though we're in a very rural area at some level, there's a lot of people around, okay? We, on this farm, grow a large variety of vegetables, fruits, flowers, things like that. The farm is certified organic, and we sell through multiple wholesale channels, CSA, things like that. In addition, we have a full grocery store and commercial kitchen on our farm. The store is sort of full diet, local and organic. It's a small store, it's highly curated, but you can literally eat out of the store year round, and you're getting mostly organ sourced organic food. Obviously not things like the coffee and the chocolate, stuff like that. The real sort of thing that, as I said in the beginning, the thing that was kind of driving us towards this was this nexus of food and community. So I really see our real motto as community through food. I tell people that the food is the gateway drug to building community, which is what we're really about. So the end goal here always is to build more community and to build those strong community ties. And in addition to those things that I just talked about, we also host a bunch of events and have an educational nonprofit and all sorts of things, again, to kind of build that community tie, okay? So we're doing a lot of different things. And I want to jump into some of the numbers here. And so ignore the chart for a second, but we've been in business for about 9 years. We had about $1 million in revenue in 2019, okay? The co-op consists of 3 stakeholder groups, so 3 classes of memberships for those of you who are co-op nerds. Currently, there are 8 worker members, so that's us staff working on the farm. 14 independent regional producers, so these are independent farms, ranches, food producers, value-added producers who are part of our co-op and whose product we are selling in addition to our own. And we have about 530 consumer members currently. Okay, there are 19 staff in the project. They have 12.5 FTE in the business. And 80% of us are something that I just learned a new word called the new majority while applying for a government grant, which was basically non-white males. Sorry for all of you who are white males. But apparently everybody else is the new majority. So we've raised about $1.4 million in equity capital to kind of make this happen over time, from mostly slow money, kind of mission aligned investors. And in 2019, the farm was profitable, but the retail part of our business, which is about 50% of our business by revenue, lost money. 2020 and 21 were a real challenge for us. We really got set back quite a bit. If you look at the chart, the orange bars are just raw revenue. And the yellow line, don't get too excited, is net margin. And if you look carefully, all of those numbers are negative. Okay, so in other words, we have never made a profit yet. Okay, we came close in 2019, but then here comes the pandemic. So if we drill a little bit down into kind of costs and challenges, our overall gross margins run at about 53% for the full business. The farm itself runs at about 80+% on gross margins. Labor is 75% of our total expense. Okay, and this is pretty common for a lot of small farms. We pay everybody a living wage, which currently is about 30% higher than the Portland area minimum wage. We are not within the Portland city limits, but we use the Portland minimum wage just because we're close enough that it affects people who live in our area. The irony, of course, is that the wage is still too low. So our starting wage is our minimum wage is $15.25 an hour right now, which is way too low really to reduce stress on people. But it's kind of high for the business to afford. So that's a real irony. And I ran some numbers the other day and I realized that if we paid the actual state minimum wage or the Portland minimum wage, we would have actually turned a net profit in 2019. Okay, so labor is our big cost. The other thing that's really kind of starting to become a challenge is climate change. In the last 2 years, I counted that we have lost over $100,000 directly to climate change impact. The photo you see here is blueberries. We grow some of the finest blueberries in the region, and we lost about 50% of our crop in 2021 to a 3-day heat dome, a little heat wave that we had. And just half the blueberries just died on the vine, okay, non-harvestable. So that was a huge challenge and very, very sad. In terms of looking ahead, 2022, we are really looking at building resilience. Like that's where our focus is. And when I say resilience, I mean both climate resilience and at some level, to me, what's more important than kind of the climate resilience on the land is the social cohesion part of this. The fact that we've been in a pandemic and instead of bringing us together, it seems to have ripped us apart even more. We're so polarized. I feel like that lack of social cohesion really hurts our business and certainly hurts our goal to build more communities. So we're trying everything we can to kind of double down on community building. On the farm side itself, we are switching 100% to no-till farming this year, which is a big change for us. We're intensifying, we're taking some ground out of production just for the year to just kind of see how it goes and to get used to this new method. We've been testing no-till farming for a couple of years now on a smaller scale, and we're sort of ready to make that big switch. We sold our tiller, so that's going to force us to do it this way, no choice. And on the retail side of the business, to build that social cohesion and community, we're really expanding our retail space and creating this kind of covered pavilion that I'm going to tell you a little bit more about, and really doubling down on community building. We're also trying to raise some capital. I mean, as I said, we've raised $1.4 million over the last 8 or 9 years. So we've had pretty good success in raising capital. We're currently raising $150,000 to kind of cover operating losses. We've done 75 already this year, so it's been a quick and easy January with another 75 to go. We're also been raising money for that pavilion I was telling you about behind our stores, and I'll show you a picture of it in a second. And we put a budget of about $120,000 to construct the thing and decided to raise all the money from the community as kind of a proof of concept that the community, cares about this. In addition, we have financial goals to kind of return the farm to profitability, either this year or next year, and then for the whole business to break even by 2024. With that sort of pavilion, this space here is our existing store building, and this structure here is what we're trying to build. So as I said, we're raising $120,000. We raised $90,000 already, so we're 75% of the way there, with $30,000 more to go. If you feel like, in addition to Beetcoin, you'd like to give us 25 bucks, go to our website and you can do that, get a little perk or something. And the part of the reason we're doing this is that we feel that, post-COVID, if there is such a thing, there's a lot of kind of pent-up desire for people to kind of experience the world in person again. And we really want to use this as a way of bringing people onto the farm year-round. Right now, we have people on the farm all the time, sometimes hundreds of people for happy hours and things like that, pizza nights, but we can't do that all year round because of the weather. So this will really help us do this, 12 months out of the year. Okay. So some conclusions, okay, and some of this is provocative just for the fun of it. And the first part isn't. I really believe that farming and food retail are a crappy business. And when I say business, I don't mean that they're a crappy livelihood or a crappy vocation. They're just crappy businesses from a business school point, sort of a viewpoint. Okay? Very low margins, lots and lots of risk, and farmers are not price makers. We are price takers, which really puts us at a massive disadvantage. Okay? I feel that most farms cook their books, not in a negative way. They're not corrupt or crook or anything like that, but I think most people, like most of the smaller farms, tend to kind of exploit the owner or their families in some way or the other. They're not paying themselves a real wage. They're doing a lot of work off the books. Uncle is helping out, so-and-so is helping out. So there's all sorts of things. And these are not necessarily negative, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But it does mean that if you look at the books, there is labor being performed that isn't being counted, okay? Obviously, there's a lot of farmers, sadly, who exploit their employees by paying sub-minimum wages. And of course, industrial farming has shown us that exploiting of the soil is a major way how our current food is grown. So I really think that farm books are kind of cooked, okay? And I'd love to hear from folks who can prove me wrong. As a co-op where everybody is an employee and everybody is getting a wage, I feel like our books are less cooked, okay? They're still cooked a little bit because I do a lot of stuff off the books as the founder. But at the end of the day, they're cooked a lot less because I do pay myself a little bit and everybody else is paid. Okay. And there's no work done on the weekends, just on the side. If you're doing work on the weekends, you're getting paid for it. Okay. So I do feel like that's one of the reasons why it's been difficult for us to post a profit on paper. Okay. However, I do believe that farming with nature, which is what we're all trying to do, can be profitable, but probably not very consistently. Okay, and certainly climate change makes this much harder. And if you look back historically, like pre-industrial farming, I doubt that farming as a vocation or a livelihood was really that profitable from a monetary standpoint year in and year out, right? Everybody knows about good years and bad years, et cetera. Best case scenario in my book is that, you know, you make maybe a $50,000 plus minus kind of profit or loss, which then in bad years means that you either have to get some sort of subsidy from the community or from elsewhere in terms of financing, or you've saved up enough in the good years to see you through some bad years. Okay, pretty obvious. But why go on, right? This is a question I ask myself all the time, you know. I think it still makes sense to kind of do what we're doing as a co-op. We're very unique as a business model. You know, we're sharing the work, we're paying decent wages, we're spreading risks and rewards, you know, and figuring out how community-supported food systems could work. So I definitely think that that's very, very important. Systemic models, I think, are very important for us to be exploring, and that's what our table is all about. It's a systemic answer to a systemic problem. Clearly, the climate change issue needs to be tackled, you know, at the individual farm level, as well as, of course, at the global level. You know, at the end of the day, I love this quote by Lord Northbourne, who said that we've tried to conquer nature by force and by intellect. It now remains to try the way of love. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's why we go on, right? Because of the love piece of it. Now, I'll stop in a few seconds and then we'll open up for questions. But before I do that, I want to just kind of throw out a couple of ideas that other people in the world have tried or are trying around this idea of sort of supporting community food systems. There's one in Germany where entire regions are taking money from the community as almost like a tax in order to then support the local community scale food system, because they're saying that part of the reason that you want to live in this region is that your quality of life is improved because there's this vibrant local food system. Okay, so that's an interesting idea. And in America, I feel like property tax levies might be an interesting way to get there. Okay, I doubt people would voluntarily do it like they're doing in Germany, but there's some interesting examples of property taxes being levied for all kinds of crazy things. So why not for local food? So I really do think that there's, you know, like in addition to all the beautiful individual kind of capital raising strategies that Slow Money has pioneered, and that with Beetcoin as this kind of a different kind of model, you know, there are perhaps other more government tax kind of models that are also worth exploring. Okay. So I'll leave it with that.
Am I, you can hear me, correct? Yes? Yeah, good. This is Woody. Kyle, let's see, we got to stop the screen share. Excellent. Hi, everybody. Well, Narendra, I didn't know you were going to lob a bomb at the end of your talk about going via taxes as opposed to individual direct action. Wow.
Both.
Damn, I couldn't disagree with you more. I disagree with you almost as much as I love you. All right, so that's a pretty interesting look. I mean, that might be a good opportunity to say we need all of the above, right? It's not like we're going to reject capitalism and choose socialism, or we're going to like accept taxation and stop individual. You know, we need everything. We need.
I'm ready to reject capitalism.
Huh?
I'm ready to reject capitalism.
Oh, well, we can come back to that in a second. You know, the way I look at it, especially because of what Narendra said about lack of social cohesion and how bifurcated, how ideologically at one another's throats we get, especially, well, it happens on many things, but especially in my experience of, you know, are you for growth or against growth? Are you for technology or against technology? Are you for capitalism or against, you know, it's Slow Money and us, whatever we are asking questions about all of this. And to me, I think it's best if we don't try to come up with one answer. I think it's best if we try a lot of different things and recognize that as flawed human beings, that's redundant, as human beings, we are going to lurch around and kind of grab for certain things, and then maybe tend to want to attach ourselves ideologically to certain things. So to me, so I'll stop talking in a second. To me, it's axiomatic that our country and the world would be better if there were more Narendras, just like I said about Zoe last week. I mean, we need more of this, a lot more. And I know a bunch of you on the call are, other Narendras, if I can be unfair to Narendra and to you. Meaning you're in the business, you're farming, you're growing food, you're doing things, or you're trying to figure out how to fund the same. So that's why we're here. So we're here in the spirit of experimentation and collaboration. Now, that last comment Narendra said, you could tell, really got to me. I'm just curious how it landed with others. So why don't we just start there for a second? I will return to the chat room in a second and try to pick out questions. Carrie Nelson, get ready, because I saw you asked a question. Elisa, I see you have a bunch of questions. So first, I just want to throw it up. I'm just curious if that last question about individual action versus local taxation is what I heard Narendra say, right? So not federal taxation, kind of regional, local taxation. Did that spark with anybody? Did anybody else get as pissed off about that as I did? Marion, I happen to see your hand go up on my screen, so go ahead, take a shot at it.
No, I think it's an excellent idea, and I'm going to bring it up in Boulder for sure. But of course, my first and foremost most love is to crowdsource from the community. But that takes a big effort to market that and sell folks on it. And we know how long you've been at it, and you've got 2 books under your belt and a very big footprint. Oh, 3, excuse me. A very big footprint in our country and around the world. So that's why I'm thinking that some mix of things are important. And maybe if we started something in the community where the government stepped up and said, we will do something, we could match that by community crowdsourcing. And Narendra, just quickly, could you add your email address? Because I would love to ask you a few more questions. Thank you in the chat. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation.
It was, and I should have started by thanking Narendra for being as open and transparent as he obviously was. I mean, not everyone would do that. So thank you for sharing as directly and openly and thoroughly as you did, Narendra. All right.
Woody?
Yes.
Woody? It's Matthew Hawkins.
Yep, go ahead.
Matthew Hawkins. I mean, Woody, I agree with you, and Narendra, I agree with you. Both, but I grew up on a farm, and farms don't make money. Big farms, industrial farms, can make money because of matters of scale. And aside from, initially I had some questions about your budget, but I don't care about that. The issue, I think, yes, I think the solutions they are local, and they're specific to each locality. And the Northwest has this history of family, so you kind of can dovetail into that potentially. But I'm curious, do you market? You don't have to answer. Do you market to people like Whole Foods and large food outlets? We have family on the island of Oahu. When you say you're ready to get rid of capitalism, they were farming, and they took their farm and put it into a foundation, okay, and by and large gave it up to a foundation. Now they manage it themselves. They have a board of directors, but by way of that, this is where the public financing issue comes in. They were able to accept grant money. State grant money and private equity money from big private investors who are interested in it. They went from a 15 to 20 acre farm on Oahu, and they're currently working about a 300 acre farm. They purchased it with money through grants, et cetera, for, was it 3.2 or 2.3 million dollars? Can't remember which, but so they scaled it up, but that's where the money came from. They don't personally own it, they work for it. And it's also a training program through the University of Hawaii and community colleges. It's it's really more a social enterprise that farms, but at the same time, it produces an enormous amount of food, and they sell to Whole Foods, to Foodland, And
The Disney Resort.
And they have a farmer's market too. But to move that much produce and to be that size of an enterprise,
With a 4-season.
yeah, and they fortunately have a 4-season growing session. But they also got excuse me, hit with climate change. They get 18 inches of rain on the farm, and they got all 18 inches of rain in approximately 6 days. They just buried lettuce, all that ground level crop. It just, was buried. So I think when I look at, Woody's method and the local method, I can't, America was founded on cheap food and cheap fuel, as far as I can see, and cheap labor. Nobody wants to pay for food. There's a few select people that'll do it, but not enough mass to support a large number of farms. I can't, I could dream that
I
up.
disagree with that characterization. 20 years ago, if I asked you, would people be willing to pay $100 a month for some device that they carry around in their pocket that beeps all the time? You would have said no. So I think people pay for what's there. So, 50 years ago, people paid a lot more as a percentage of income for food than they do today. People pay a lot more for housing today than they did even 10 years ago, and their houses haven't improved necessarily. It's just basically speculation that has driven up the price of housing to these insane quantities. So I would argue that it's really about what the culture expects and what the expectations are. And I think those expectations can be changed. We pay more for healthcare. Like America spends $260 billion a year on dealing with the side effects of type 2 diabetes, which we know is primarily a diet-driven disease. I mean, $260 billion could build you a whole new local food system where you could really reduce the incidence of diabetes. So we have the money. We just spend it later in our lives when we're half dead with cancer. I don't think the money is the issue.
I agree.
So who is that? Who is just chiming in? I can't see. Somebody said they agree, and I want more voices.
That was Matthew Hawkins. I agree with
that was just Matthew.
There.
You caved to Narendra that fast? I was just going to say, obviously you're both right. Meaning
Yes, absolutely.
It like depends on when in history you drop in and when you put your finger on the thing and say that year we're going to look at this and how you understand trends. That's why in that little video that some of you saw before we went on, we said 50 years ago, there were only a few dozen land trusts. Now there are 1,400. Now, have land trusts like saved the world? No. Have CSAs saved the world? No. But something's going on there that people wouldn't have thought was possible. I think the CSA thing is quite remarkable, even though right now the general consensus is they've kind of plateaued a little bit and no one's quite sure, what the next thing is for CSAs. But 600,000 people get their food from 7,000 CSAs in this country. And that is a hybrid form of capitalism and socialism. Those people are paying more for their food. They have the lack of convenience. They don't even get to pick the food that goes into the box. They might have to go to the farm to get it. And so that's a pretty good indicator to me, Matthew, of let's say, the possibility of more broad-based shift. And I think when I hear Narendra talking the way he just did, he's kind of using a tipping point argument or like, don't constrain ourselves by what has been. Things can change fairly quickly in rather unexpected ways. So, okay, let's get some other voices in here. Carrie Nelson, a while back, you wanted Narendra to say a little bit more about the profitability or lack thereof. Carrie, are you still there? If you are, I'd like you to ask the question yourself.
Yeah, I'm still here, and I apologize that my camera does not work, but hopefully my audio is. Yep. It is, just nod your head. Good, there you go. So I was curious, actually, Narendra, when you were talking about profitability of the business overall versus profitability of the retail arm of that, what is the difference between those two?
Sorry, yes.
Metrics,
the farm, sells its product to its output to a whole variety of channels, right? Directly to the CSA, to our own store on the premises, and those two things together, sort of direct to consumer things, make up maybe, I would say, let's say about 30% of the farm's output. The remainder of the farm's output goes to wholesale channels within the Portland metro region. grocery stores, restaurants, cafeterias, things like that.
Great, and you found a good demand for that?
Yes.
And at a price point you think works?
No.
Okay,
Because
but
farmers
good.
aren't price takers. So nobody ever asked me, what does it cost to grow your carrots? And then you can price them based on that. Firstly, we don't really know. It's very difficult on a mixed operation farm to figure out cost of production for, let's say, a bunch of carrots, right?
Right.
People are working on that, but it's more challenging than it should be. That at least that one would like. And then secondly, we don't get to set prices. There's some mechanism that's not an invisible hand. That's more like an invisible stick poking at all of us. That's setting prices, and it's really more set on what are other people doing. Well, other people don't know any better than us anyway. So why the heck are we? I mean, it's kind of like at a farmer's market. When you go to the farmer's market in the morning, the farmers tend to walk around and look at what other people are charging and then adjust their prices. Well, who says that the Joe at the stall next door has a better handle on what it costs you to produce something than you do? So I think pricing is a huge problem. And, like we're all talking about inflation right now. And I mean, in the last 9 years, our price for wholesale blueberries has gone from $3.60 a pound to $2.80 a pound. So it's gone down. In the same time frame, my harvest labor costs have doubled. So how does that, how do we compute? We're not allowed to set our own prices.
Right, you can, you just need potentially different outlets, which is why I was curious about your own retail outlet. That does not provide that additional bump for you, or it does, but just not
but even in our own retail outlet, we can't charge what it really costs. We can only charge what the market is willing to bear. So kind of like that previous conversation we were just having, at some level, it depends on what other stores are charging. And the other stores in this case are big, giant national retail chains who have very different economics from what we do and sell a very different product. You can't really compare our product to theirs.
They do. And to your point earlier about taxes, I think something that we all need to remember is that the very, very large farms that are out there are actually getting a hell of a lot of tax money. It just doesn't go to the smaller producers. It doesn't go to the producers who are making the food that is actually, to another of your points, healthful for people, good for people, fresh for people, all those other things. It's going to the opposite end of the spectrum on that, and it's a lot of money. So it's just a question of reapportioning that. Good luck with that, but in my humble opinion, that's kind of what one of the ways that can be pushed a little.
So whenever having these discussions, I mean, there is a danger in kind of chasing our tail a little bit, but that's a risk we have to take. We just have to keep reminding ourselves. Narendra touched on some of this in his response to Matthew, and the questions come up again and what Kerry was just saying. You just got to keep reminding yourself. In 1900, 40 cents of every consumer dollar went to the farmer. So when you went to the store, to the A&P or wherever or the local store, wherever you went in 1900, 40 cents of the money you paid to the storekeeper went to the farmer. Today, it's like 7 cents or whatever it is. It's less than, it's somewhere between 5 and 10 cents. So intermediation, processing, distribution, retailing, all that stuff has taken a larger and larger share, of the pie. Okay, here's another factoid. And I think these things we just have to keep saying them to ourselves. In Italy, let's do it as a quiz. What percentage of the average take-home of the average household budget do Italians spend on food? Let's have some guesses. Come on, people. 5? Joni,
30%.
We have a 25. We have a 30.
30.
Okay.
I was gonna say 40, actually, 40 or 50. because
Okay.
They love to eat.
Okay. 17%. This is kind of interesting. We don't even have to draw a conclusion from this too much. So it's 17%. What is it in the US?
2.
11.
That's so it's maybe 7.
Yeah.
Okay. So I always like to ask, the question I like to ask after that quiz is, are Italians paying more for food because they're stupid? Okay, that's one question. Next question, does the fact that they pay more for food mean they have a lower standard of living? It certainly doesn't mean they have a lower quality of life.
Hell
Right.
no.
So So all of these things kind of tie back into kind of what Matthew is, when you raise the question of taxes and public policy, you get into all of this stuff. It's like, how do you push money around in the economy in ways that, let's say, the drive for cheapness doesn't make it go. The drive for cheapness leads us to big industrial monocultures, and then it makes it really hard for people like Narendra and Zoe and all the people we care about to actually produce food the right way. So, Rome wasn't built in a day. We're not going to turn the super tanker in a second. It's all these things. I mean, I know I'm speaking for everybody. We're not concluding yet. It sounds like we're concluding. When I say how much we respect what Narendra is doing, I mean, he just sat down and went, okay, we have some resources and we're friggin' going to do this and we're going to figure it out. And it's got to work. We got to make it work because it's too important not to work, and he's sticking with it. And I think that's the spirit that certainly I've seen in a lot of slow money people over the last decade. But again, sort of tying back to Matthew's thing, it's nice to have a kind of a skeptical hand grenade thrown at the beginning. I mean it, because the odds we face are incredibly daunting, right? Time is short, things are still going in the wrong direction, and the odds are long. So to me, it just says, you got two options: give up or go, and so we're going. And so if we're going to go, we got to go with as many tools as we have. And Narendra is a great example of someone who had enough money. By the way, I'm sure he doesn't have as much money as half the people on this call think he has. Not that it's any of my business, but I'm just saying, he's made a huge commitment in his life. I know, because when I went to visit, his wife was kind of mean to me. I mean, I know, thank God you're all laughing. I hope Michelle didn't hear that comment, because she was not mean to me. But he's making a huge life commitment, as are all the farmers. I see some other farmers on the call. And I think those of us, coming back to Narendra's comment, we have the money. We have enough money. We just got to say, this is so important that we're going to put our money to work in a new way on this. And for an investor, it means we're going to let go of the old-fashioned way of thinking about return on investment. For Narendra, it meant letting go of his sense of risk. He just had to say, we're going to go and we're going to keep going. As a society, it means being willing to pay a lot more for food. And coming back to Matthew's question, is like, can Americans do that? Well, it's not going to, there's some evidence that they won't, and there's some evidence that they are. And our job is to make it be so. I mean, without sounding Pollyannish about it. And there could be a tipping point thing here. I think there could be. So I'm just here to reflect back to you guys. I've been talking to thousands of people all over the world, tens of thousands probably by now. And there is something going on that might give us a little way to get through there and make a lot of more stuff happen. There's no reason to give up. And the question, and it's not going to take that much money. That's the beauty of it, especially at a local level. You're not talking about huge amounts of money. You're talking about a few $100s here, a few $100s there, a few $1,000s there, a few tens of thousands of dollars there. So shame on us if we can't make it happen. Sorry for that sermon. Let's go back to the questions. Let's see, Elisa, you didn't really ask a question, but you put in the chat room how you're taxed to solve stormwater problems. And people complain, but they're still paying the tax. So I don't know if that's just a comment. That wasn't really a question. I don't know if you wanted to follow up on that at all. If you're there, just chime in.
I think we all know this, but that agribusiness is such a huge problem that we're subsidizing with our own tax money, this craziness. And I think part of it, what I'm realizing just being part of this conversation, is that like some of us here haven't really internalized that yet. Like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why are we talking about, you've been diving into it for a long time, but why are we talking when the system is broken? The system is not set up in a way that's regenerative. And so why are we trying to work within the context of this existing system when it's broken? Like, I don't know. I don't want to start ranting right now, but I think it involves like a paradigm shift, and it has to do with our spiritual natures as rising to our highest potential. And like, what are we doing? trying to work within the context of nonprofits or even for profit when this doesn't work. I don't know if I'm making sense to anybody but myself.
I'll try to just weave a little something from that, which is, to me, the local piece, the sense of place, is the thing that allows us to weave all this stuff together without going crazy. Meaning, there are so many imponderables. I mean, you touched on a bunch of them. You said the word spiritual. You said paradigm. I see another question in here. Nate Berry, I'll call on you if you want to chime in next. Was asking a question about, if you're taxing people and allocating taxes, who gets to pick which farm the tax money goes to, and you get into all of that stuff. To me, the local thing is the way out of all of this, because when you are dealing with the people who live in the place where you live and your neighbors and you're cohabitating in a bioregion, you just have to kind of work it out. You just have to kind of directly find your way to solutions. We are certainly doing this in these local soil groups. I guess I should put a plug in for them too. Not a plug, but I should just plant a flag. So the groups that are getting together to make 0% loans, that Beetcoin is a way to help. They are groups of between, the smallest one has about 50 members, and the largest one has about 115, 120 members. And the loans are made by consensus of the members. It's not a perfect process, but it actually is. Tim Francis is on here somewhere, if he's still on. He lives in Boulder. He's a farmer. Well, Lynn and Matthew Hawkins are from Boulder. So this is not a time to like pump the Boulder crowd or anything, but I'm just saying I went to all those meetings and I helped start a bunch of the other groups. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff here that works because it's local, not ideological. And I want to come back to what Narendra said, which could be dismissed as being so silly, kind of Pollyannish about love, which I love that quote. That's why in my book, I talk about biophilia. I use E.O. Wilson's term philia for the innate affection humans have for other living things. That's actually a real thing in my experience. It's a real thing.
Maybe we just have to acknowledge, first of all, Narendra, thank you so much for that presentation. Maybe we just need to acknowledge that what Narendra is doing is way more profitable than anything we've ever called profit, and flock to do what Narendra is doing and just shut up already about how much money we're going to be making, because you can't eat money. What are we doing? I've been working in this area for, like a decade as a volunteer. I've made zero. I've put thousands of hours into this. And I feel rich. So let's redefine what wealth is. Narendra, you are wealthy. Thank you for offering your time and your energy and your effort into what you're doing, because that's what we all need to be doing.
So like I said at the beginning, that sort of permaculture ethic of sharing the surplus, I think is actually a very useful frame. If we're honest with ourselves and go, what are the surpluses we have? Maybe it's knowledge, maybe it's desire to do something, it's, whatever it is, to share that freely with the community, whether that's, dollars and cents or material things or non-material things. I think that really is the starting point, is to be honest, do a little navel gazing and share your surpluses.
Those who were on last week and listened to Zoe Bradbury explain her journey, we got to the same place. I think we're going to see what these themes are as we keep doing these Beetcoin dialogues. It got to the same place where some people said, how can you keep going? Like, what are you doing? What did you pay yourself all these years when you're just trying to grow the thing to $300,000 in revenue? And by the way, someone, I don't remember who, I could try to find here, asked at the very beginning of in the chat room, how could Zoe Bradbury have made $300,000 on 6 acres? Watch the podcast watch our recording of the thing from last week. You'll see the answer. She's grossing about roughly $75,000 an acre from 4 acres of intensely cultivated row crops. She has like, 75 varieties of row crops. And there are other examples of that kind of intensive cultivation in the United States. So whoever asked that question, do a little homework, read the thing, and call me if you want. And by the way, I'm at woody@slowmoney.org in case anybody wants to reach me to have any further contacts or conversations of any kind. So let's see. I said it's 7:56. Tim, I sort of called on you, but you didn't seem like you wanted to say anything, but I see you.
No, yeah, I wanted
something quick. By the way, people haven't been saying where you're from. Say where you're from and what you do, and then say something.
Yeah, so I wanted to point out too, there's a couple other people who had their hands raised, so I want to make sure they have a chance to speak here. But so I'm Tim Francis, coming in from Boulder, Colorado, and yeah, I just wanted to say, first of all, some really inspiring conversation here. Narendra, just really looking forward to find out more about your project. I'd love to connect with you offline, hear a little bit more about what you're up to, because there's so many parallels between what we're trying to do with our little tiny urban farm project in Boulder. And we are coming up against a lot of the same just sort of challenges right now. I mean, we're entering our 8th year as a little urban farm operation, that we've been on rented land for most of that time. We just had an amazing campaign to actually purchase the land, where we had over 600 families in the community that contributed, so that our nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit, now owns the land that it's operating this farm on. But that's just one piece. You know, we had to put so much money into an extractive real estate market just to take this property out of that extractive market and just give ourselves the right to be here growing this food, and then actually funding the operation itself, and receiving the financial return for the product that we're producing for the community is like a whole other challenge. So but I just wanted to say that I think there's a lot of different models that have to be tried, and I think that what soil is doing is really inspiring and also is not far enough. And I think that what Narendra, you're trying is like a unique alternative as well. And I think there's going to be more ideas that we need to try out. The thing that the major criticism I have of soil, which I want to say is not at all discounting the amazing like impulse that it is, but we need to go beyond giving loans to farmers, even if they're 0%. Like, we really need to come together as a community and support our local agricultural systems. And I don't know what that looks like yet. And I think that the soil model of 0% loans is a step in the right direction, but it's only a step. And it needs to be like, this paradigm shift needs to happen, where we realize that investing in our farmers is more than others on here have been saying, the returns are much more than the financial return to the community. The returns to the community for supporting its local farmers are immense. So I don't know if I need to say anything more on that. I'll let other people speak.
I saw a message that said a few other people had their hands up, but I was having trouble figuring out how to identify them from the chat room. So people just jump in. Just jump in if you've been waiting to jump in.
Hey, this is Andy Hazard. I'm in Pecatonica, Illinois. And I've been thinking a lot about, obviously we need to enforce antitrust laws, change the way we do business, and putting like planet, people, profits. I think the healthcare thing could be changed some by the knowledge that we have with DNA now, and directly identifying what is wrong with people. I just had a health issue that was solved by 23andMe, and that was really exciting, and it saved me a lot of money. On the taxes at the federal level, those taxes keep the farmer afloat so that the corporations can continue to extract the soil. Actually is what they're extracting. We're essentially just putting dirt on boats and shipping it all over the world. And the farmers are bearing the brunt of that loss. And it's funny because we talk about, oh, we're going to put all the carbon back in the soil and we'll be able to have businesses offset that. And I'm like, no, that's our own carbon. Like, you have to figure out how to offset your own carbon, because we're just putting our soil back in our, we're putting the life back in our dirt that we've lost over 100 years. So it's an interesting time, but that money, it goes to John Deere, it goes to Bayer, it goes to ChemChina, it goes to JBS. It's not making it to the farmer. Now, how we should change how the government pays farmers, yeah, let's talk about it. But it's definitely, generally speaking, not making it to the farmer. And they are tightening up laws around people that buy a hobby farm for a tax write-off. So that's helpful. But I think one of the things, like for me, that would help amongst all the other things would be an offset system for carbon credits. If there was an app and a way I could load up my farm and then directly offset, not just the carbon, but the ecological services that I'm providing, say with like having beavers on my property or things like that. I think that would be a really big help to farmers in order to like make a little bit more money as we fix the rest of the system. And I'll stop there, and thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andrea. And good to see you. So now I figured out, I see a hand finally. So it's Susan Moran. Before I call on you, just because it is 8:02, so I broke the rule a little bit. We're a little bit past. Let's just keep going a little bit more since we still have most of our people on. Susan.
Hey, Woody, thanks a lot. I wanted to say thanks again for the conversation I had with you several months ago. And I did read your book, Aha, and I've been studying investments and whatnot, and seeing just how the historicalness of past, the way that we invest in society is not sustainable. It just really isn't. And what I fell in love with the slow money movement is I've seen a number of farms. I was born and raised in California. I grew up going to one of the very first farmers markets. I was at a community college, and that was 35 years ago. When that movement began, there was, like I said, 1 or 2 markets. There's now over 175 markets in a 5-county area. And the people who go to those markets are thriving. I mean, you see people who are healthy, they're happy, the children are learning how to eat. And I believe this whole culture and this whole movement has everything to do about education. That we are what we eat, and what we put our inputs in is what then creates the regeneration and the sustainability of those things, such as food. And if we're not feeding the world, then those politicians are going to starve to death. Like if we're feeding conversations that have integrity and conversations that work, and also putting hands on the ground and having those systems be put into place with processes and actions that facilitate this sustainable way of working and living with plants and animals and bugs and ladybugs and everything, we're really doing our part to be caretakers on the planet. And funding farms for whatever 0% loans to, angel investors, to kind money, gift money, all of it comes back to us, because at the end of the day, where I stand today and what the future puts out in front of me for 100 years forward is what's going to be available to everybody on the planet. So it's a long-term plan for the total health of everyone and everything.
Thank you for those beautiful comments. Okay, it's 8:05, so I think I am going to officially, you don't have to go anywhere if you want, I'm not going anywhere, but I think just in the spirit of trying to hold these things to an hour, we should, first of all, let's all applaud for Narendra.
Thank you.
I want to share a very quick, kind of funny little anecdote from the trenches. And it's going to sound like I'm being defensive against Tim Francis's comment about the soil groups. And I sort of am, but I'm not. It goes like this. The first meeting of Soil Boulder, which was maybe 3 years ago, Tim was there. We had maybe 40 people at that time, and we made a $12,000 loan at that meeting. And people coming to the meeting didn't really expect to have a loan decision to make. It was our first meeting. We had 40 people who chipped in. They knew that what they chipped into. I sprung something on them and said, we have a farmer here who needs a loan. And we all voted on the loan. Actually, there were maybe 44 people in the room, because I think Tim, I don't know if Tim's still on there. The vote was like
Yes, I
40,
am.
the vote was like 43-1, and the one negative vote was Tim.
That's right. That was
And
me.
And so I never stopped kidding him about it.
Yep.
If there's any doubt about how much we care for one another, that should be dissipated immediately. But so my answer, I want to answer Tim's comment in a way that just brings us together for a second of gratitude and looking forward, which is, to me, all of these conversations, all the comments in the chat room, all of the issues you've raised, and the other 50 that we didn't get to just talk about. Whoops, somebody needs to mute themselves.
Why things happen.
Falls under the heading of let's figure it out as we go. Let's do this. Now, this to me means we need to get many, many, many millions of dollars a year, tens of millions of dollars. It doesn't mean through Beetcoin per se. We're just offering Beetcoin as one of the vehicles. But we need to take our money and begin doing it, and not sit around arguing about which way is best. We need it all. We need it all. So I think we're all here in that spirit. So we are going to archive the recordings of these Beetcoin dialogues. It's going to take us a few more weeks probably to get it up on our website, but we will. So you'll see all the past ones if you want to, things you missed, and then we'll put the schedule of the ones coming up. And I've started lining up the future ones, and we have some great programs coming up. We will let you see what they are further in advance as we go. We're just kind of catching up. So thank you all so much. Was there anything else I needed to say at the end? I don't think so. This concludes the official part of our proceedings. We look forward to seeing you all, and some of you again in a couple of weeks. And thank you all for your time. Okay, so now, Nate, I didn't get to you. I see you're still on. Do you want to make it? You want to share some of your comments with those of us who are? We still have almost 50 people on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it really gets into the weeds pretty quickly. I think, and the comments about what farm is beneficial. Does the remember, Woody, you came up to Maine at the time, in Western Maine, to the conference, and at that time, that was 2010, I think. There was a discussion about product and the imbalance because transportation is cheap. Also, there are all these things that are cheap: food, transportation, fuel is part of that equation. And at that time, I think one of the ag people from Maine, revealed that we were importing 12 million pounds of potatoes, or we were importing 14 and exporting 12 million pounds of potatoes. There's like, what kind of sense does that make? So if you're, also the challenge, in rural areas, the tax base is stressed to begin with. It's not like, those people moved there to be close to the farms. They either worked on the farms, they're part of the local economy. So there's a real challenge of sort of getting the community's money's worth. And do you do that by, pushing people into categories, into, forcing, or by, opting in to growing community vegetables, for instance? Some of the examples in Maine that we've seen is the food bank has a program that's called Mainers Feeding Mainers. And so they pay a premium for local farms that are growing produce that the community foundation, the food bank buys. So there are things like that that grow the local economy. And that has an impact on wages as well. Farm wages go up when there's this market that's sort of known about it, or known in advance. And we have the issues of the whole local food economy. It's a big system, and it needs a lot of help. And unfortunately, it's actually working exactly as it was designed to work. And the challenge is changing the design.
Yeah, great point. Yeah, the problem isn't that we don't have enough efficiency, so we have too much efficiency, basically. Schumacher started one of the chapters in Small is Beautiful with a sentence that says something like, the modern industrial economy is one of the least efficient inventions of modern man. It's pretty close paraphrase. And he said it to be provocative because meaning there are lots of micro efficiencies, but we've exported all these long-term costs to the system and the whole system is going to break down. So it's going to turn out to be very inefficient in the long run. But
Woody, can I say one more thing? This is Matthew Hawkins in Boulder.
Yep.
With Narendra said that the pandemic kind of buried, dropped his profitability. It made him non-profitable according to his own curve. The farm that I grew up on, I rented for many years to local farmers. And aside from the fact that I'm not doing that anymore because of a family issue, these folks manage about 250 acres, which they lease. It's north of Pittsburgh. And the pandemic, because his infrastructure of sales to grocery stores, to food banks, to locality, and he has a very small retail outlet on a 4-lane highway, but it's not as big as even the one Narendra was picturing. He said, I couldn't sell. He says, I could sell everything. He says, the pandemic created such a desire for local food. And this is North Pittsburgh. These people, this is not a, shall I say, an enlightened community. This is just straightforward hard-nosed Pittsburgh. He says, I sold 3 times. Everything I could grow, I could sell and more during the pandemic. So when you look at what you were saying and what Narendra was saying, it is local, and the demand that the response, food is local anyway. I mean, we make it non-local by buying it all over the world, but there's this huge local demand for food and people will go to it. And the pandemic in many ways has proven it. But the infrastructure to move it, they already had it set up on a large scale, and the demand just grew inside their own infrastructure at that point. Now, he's been farming all his life, and I'm going to say that's like 20 years he's been at it. And I'll end with that. So again, it can work. It is local, so on and so forth. I agree with doing everything.
Joni, were you raising your hand or were you just waving? Oh wait, Mark, hang on. Mark Epstein's been waiting for a while. He's officially raised his hand. Hang on. Mark, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. So I'm here in North Carolina, and as I mentioned on the chat, Woody, I met you at SVN probably 30, 40 years ago. And I have a small farm here in North Carolina. I'm from Chicago, and we happen to be a veganic farm because we wanted to show also how you could really take care of the soil without depending upon a whole spectrum of animal inputs. So what I wanted to mention is that some of the challenges, as I listened to Narendra talk and the experience that we have here, it really comes down to the inequality of access to food, not the ability to grow food, and the improper pricing of food. So one of the things that we're trying to imagine on the local scale is really, it comes from the work of Elinor Ostrom and the whole experience of what tragedy of the commons means and how commons becomes something that people like to take care of in a local community where they have local social, spiritual experiences together. It is, in my mind, something that starts local. It starts in the community. And there are many people in our community here that have boatloads of money. And there are many people in our community here that don't have any money, not at all, zero, negative, And if I were to be charging what it costs to grow my tomatoes, my wife makes a joke, I grow the $64,000 tomatoes because that's what it really costs to grow them. If I were to charge that, only a very, very small number of people could afford it. And so it comes down to inviting them, to making it easy for them to contribute to the distribution, to the accessibility of this food as an imperative of care, an imperative of what it means and the value that it represents to the community. And so I think that in my mind, every single project that is local, that is community-based, that is building that nature of community surrounding the local food production, it enhances everybody in the community, and it welcomes in everybody to find the resources that they have control of, that they can direct in a way for the benefit of all. So I put my big vote into the word local.
Beautifully said. I love the phrase imperative of care, or imperative to care. Imperative of care, I think is the way he said it. Well, and that is what we're trying to do with this Beetcoin thing. I'm not harping on that. Please don't take me wrong, everybody. I'm just sharing from the heart. I mean, so that imperative to care has to find expression, and it's got to find expression from people who can do $1, people can do $1 million, and it's not a traditional investment. You could use the word invest if you want to say we're investing in our common future. You could say all kinds of words, but it's not investing like investing became known in the 20th century. That's for sure.